Hello. So in today's session, I'm going to be taking you on my entire journey of how I created this image from start to finish. Before I get into the hows, I kind of want to talk about my inspiration and what led to me creating this image. So just so you know, this is a proof of concept. This is meant to be the first step in a larger idea that I have. That was inspired first off by my move from New York City to California about 6 months ago. I've been noticing kind of the surf culture out here. I think it's really amazing with the colors and the aesthetics and just like some of the being that's around it. I find it all very fascinating. So I kind of got this earworm, especially after I got this book and saw some of the images. One image in particular that really inspired me. I'm like, man, I just kind of want to replicate this look in 3D. And another inspiration point was a conversation I was having with my wife. We were talking about like if we had, 6 months off, like what would we do with that time? Just kind of like ideals. Would you write a book? Would you, write a screenplay? Would you, get super shape or something like that? And immediately about where I said, I want to teach our kids how to surf. And I thought that was like such a cool thing. So I've had that in my head too of like what it would look like in a space if a mom brought her daughter to a surf shack to like learn how to surf. Like what would the objects in that space look like? Where would that, like if you didn't see the characters, if you didn't like have that explicit story, like what would that environment look like? So that was something that I was kind of building here. So you can see that in the two surfboards, the two cups on the table, the one shared plate, the two books stacked on top of each other. This idea of a mother and a daughter doing this thing together. So that's the inspiration for this. Again, this is the first idea, hopefully a larger project of the outcome, but I just wanted to make sure that before I dive too deep into it, this was something that I wanted to create. So that's the backstory to it. Let's jump into how this was created. So when kicking off any project, the very first thing I do is I gather reference. I brainstorm, I come up with ideas, I do sketches, and basically I just kind of get my mind wrapped around what I'm going to be doing. So the first thing I did was I found this really amazing book called Surfshack, and I just kind of started flipping through it. It's a beautiful book that kind of lays out different surf shacks around the United States and really around the world. And one of the images that I was drawn to was this one right here. So I love these concrete walls with patterns in them. You see them all over California. It's not something that I'm used to growing up in the Midwest and living on the East Coast. Never saw them before. I've always been drawn to them. So this image really inspired me. So it's basically a concrete wall, a solid wall, and a surfboard in the corner. So what I did was I just kind of like sat down on Procreate and I just put together this really rough sketch of a similar layout. But like I said, two surfboards, two books, two cups, this idea of the mother and daughter together. From there, I went into gathering up some surfboard reference. So these were all done using another book that I found called Surfcraft. That's all about surfboard design through the ages. So different shapes of boards, different patterns. I didn't really know what I was looking for when I was gathering these. I just knew I wanted one tall, longer, sturdier one of like a traditional design and kind of a shorter one for the daughter. So I just grabbed a couple different references there and figured I'd piece those together. For the concrete wall, like I said, I grabbed this one from the book, and then this one is just a photograph. You can see the dashboard of my car. I was lost and pulled into this parking lot, and to turn around, and I saw this thing, and I made my family stop and take this picture. They thought I was insane, but that's how it rolls. And then for some other elements like the pottery, this is just me being selfish. I love Japanese pottery. And I just think it's absolutely gorgeous, and some of the textures and styles and colors and shapes that you get. So I didn't dive too deep into this for this project, but I think in the future, as I'm moving forward with this aesthetic, I want to dive a little bit more deeply into this. And same thing with the furniture design. So I've always been drawn to mid-century modern, clean lines, natural materials, things like that. So once I kind of had my reference all in place and my sketch kind of done, I had a better understanding of what I wanted to create. I then moved into Maya and I started kind of laying it out. And this has always just kind of been my process. So again, just simple blocks and shapes. Instead of doing surfboards, I just did two elongated cubes. Instead of doing a concrete wall with a pattern, I created like just this rudimentary wall with some holes in it. Cups and plates are just cylinders, boxes here, a little box on the wall. The idea being is I just kind of wanted to get a rough idea of the layout and where the camera would be and that kind of thing. It's just to get like a little proof of concept, because sometimes when you're looking at a photograph or a concept sketch, It looks great flat, but the second you lay it out into a real image, it starts to break down. So I didn't want to do that. I felt pretty good about it. And then from here, it's just a matter of going in and actually starting to build the model. So that's when I open Modeler and I kick off that process. So kicking things off in Adobe Substance 3D Modeler, what I wanted to do is I wanted to begin with the mom's surfboard. It's kind of a long board. It's meant to be like, a design that's more stable, more stoic, more like long-winded. She's the rock in the family, that kind of thing. So you can see, if you've never used Substance Modeler before, it's a voxel-based modeling program that allows you to quickly add geometry, delete geometry in a way that's very intuitive and very straightforward. I can stretch and bend and warp and twist this stuff all around. And I can kind of get the general overall shape that I was intending from the beginning. So you can see me here just kind of trying to get a little bit of elongation on the tip of this board, just to create it so it's not like a perfectly, a hemisphere shaped shape out of there. And I just want to lift it up a little bit to create a little bit of that curvature from back to front. Within this process, there's no polygons actually being built this time. That's the beauty of the voxel-based modeling stuff. It only creates quads and tries upon export. So you can really have the freedom to you see me smoothing the edges here, really kind of going in and making adjustments to the object without worrying about the actual polygonal integrity of the object. So you can see me adding the fins on the bottom. It's just a couple of little spheres that I've squished down, or cylinders that I've squished down. And then I'm going to go ahead, add that shape, cut off the top, and then just make some final adjustments to their position and size and kind of work them out a little bit before merging them back with the main surfboard body and kind of smoothing them into place. So one thing to note here that I should draw attention to is that I am not I'm a professional 3D artist, but modeling is not my strongest suit. So this is a lot of, just kind of trial and error for me as I'm going through this process, as you'll see. So, this is the beauty of modelers. It's kind of for everybody, not just for people who have used a lot of modeling software before. So at this point, I'm exporting it. I didn't really know how many polys or tries I wanted. So I just kind of trial and error, and my default is to always crank it up way too high. And so you'll see me come back to that later on as I reduce that. But, first out of the gate, you don't really know, and you just kind of want to make sure. But that's the nice thing is it saves the voxelized model for you, and you can always go back and adjust it. All right, so I got the mom's surfboard down. Now I want to jump up and do the daughter's. For this one, I'm going to use this sportier kind of split tail design. You can see me flipping back and forth between Pure Ref and Modeler to kind of, get an idea of the shape. To be honest with you, at this point, I had no idea how I was going to get the tip of that board or the back of the board or just kind of the overall shape in general. So I just, whenever I'm feeling that way, I kind of go through a process, and you'll see me go through it here a couple times actually, where I jump in, both feet first, just start playing with stuff, messing with stuff, deleting, adding, subtracting, whatever I need to do. And what I find is that when I go through this process, I start to kind of formulate the idea. And if I push and I push and I push, you can kind of get 90% of the way there. But the problem is that when you get 90% of the way there without knowing what you're doing from the beginning, that last 10% is nearly impossible, because the foundation of what you built just isn't structurally sound enough. And I know that going into it. So what I do is I still go through that process of pushing and clawing and trying to get it as good as I can get it, with the understanding of once I reach that 90% point, I'm just going to go ahead and delete it as I just did there and start anew. It feels backwards. It feels like that's the wrong way to approach it. But the reality is getting from 90% to 100% on a poorly made model, or light rig or animated character or whatever, is going to take you 10 times the amount of time than if you just deleted it and started from scratch, at least from my experience. There's been so many shots on films that I worked on where it's like I worked with the light rig, and then I just decided that it was faster to just delete what I had and start anew. Because what you can create is a much more efficient, much more streamlined final product that you're ultimately going to have more control over once you start getting notes. So for this surfboard, you can see like I kind of figured out that if I use these two like flattened cylinders and merge them together with a symmetry tool, and then delete some of the geometry on the side, I can really get that nice split tailed back end of this. Now onto the front. You see me probably start and stop how I'm going to get that specific shape of the front in Modeler without much success. At this point, I'm just playing around with some primitive shapes and just being like, man, if I just like, I bet you there's a setting that I'm just not thinking of that I can really create that shape and you know, like, and really kind of nail that in. So you can see me doing that here with, again, a couple of like flattened cylinders. It worked really well for the tail. Maybe it'll work again for the front. At this point, I'm thinking, you know, okay, here, I'm just going to throw a bunch of stuff on the tip. Like if you think about Modeler in terms of clay, I'm just going to like stack clay on top of this, and then I'm going to delete it away. And then I couldn't figure out how to make that work. So I thought, okay, what if I just like use the warp tool to warp out the middle and then grab the tip and just pull that out directly. As you can see, or you're about to see here, that does not go that well, because then I'm like, oh, I cut too much. Okay, let me warp it out again. Okay, let me cut it down a little more. Okay, I'll warp it back out again. And what ends up happening is and this is me like doing that, you know, getting 90% of the way there, and it being like fundamentally broken to the point where I just like, you can't cleanly get that final 10% out. So now I'm at a point where I'm like, okay, I think like this is kind of a better way to do it. Like I've got I found that cylinder shape that worked, and then I kind of pinched that tip, and I was like, ooh, and like actually at this point, I feel like I might actually have it, but you're gonna see me flip it over here in a second. And once I flip it over, I know it's like game over, because it's just not looking very good. So I was like, okay, cool, I've got this. I wish I could smooth that down and get roughly about that shape. All right, cool. Smooth. All right, let's flip this thing over. Oof, that is a tough cut. That is not, all right, but billow it back out. All right, push, pull, great. And this is the part where I was realizing, oh, the tip's kind of shaped down. And again, like I go up underneath it, and it is just like a squirrely mess down there. There we go. Yeah, that's not gonna cut it. So I can, maybe try and smooth this out, like try and flatten it out, like, eesh, like, I don't know, man. So this is the hardest part. This is where, again, 90% of the way there, and you feel like you're like, you know what, it's just better if I just start over. So here we go again. I know how to do the back, got the overall shape. Trim that back, get my cylinders, flatten those down, symmetry. I'm an expert at this now, no problems whatsoever. Boom. Lay them down, use symmetry to clip off those edges, smooth that down. Amazing. I've now done it a couple of times in the past. I know that, like, if I just use this warp tool with the symmetry, I can, in a really, really big radius, I can get that nice bubble in the middle. Awesome. To get the tip, I just, again, same flattened, elongated cylinders using the symmetry tool. Just kind of rounding it out so it's near the edges, making sure the height is about the same so I don't get that janky bottom again. Just trimming it down just a touch, just to kind of get that tip up a little bit. Again, it's certainly not perfect, but this is a really good starting point and a much better final conclusion to the model than if I would have taken that first or even that second iteration and just kept shoving and pushing and grinding at those. Ultimately it's just a better product. So again, same thing as the other one, just creating a couple flattened cylinders for the fins, just making sure that those are aligned up right. It's a little bit of a different shape. So like, I'm getting those in place with the symmetry tool. And then clipping off the tops using the delete and half of the back. So it's like a quarter of a cylinder there. And then same thing, I had the separate pieces of geo while I was positioning them, but I wanted to merge them together with the main body of the surfboard and then just smoothing it down with a nice big radius and a strong setting to kind of make everything come together really nicely. The symmetry tool is great for these surfboards because it keeps everything nice and even across them. So highly recommend using that if you plan on doing an object like this. All right, so next up, we're going to be importing the surfboards into our Maya scene here. And for that, I'm just going to use the reference editor to make sure that I can, swap it out later if I decide to go with a lower res version of it or, modify the models in any way. I can just switch out the reference and it'll pop into place in the 3D scene. So I'm going to go ahead and, drop these surfboards in the corner. I want this mother surfing character to be the supportive one, so I want the smaller daughter surfboard to be leaning up against it. Just kind of making sure the scale is right, feeling about right there, so positioning them into place. And then for our next step, I want to start modeling out some of the different assets. From there, I'm going to go on to that mid-century modern coffee table. So it's pretty straightforward. I'll just bevel a little cube shape here to get the table top, set that into place. And then from there, just kind of work with the different components of it. So like everything about this table, it's symmetric. So I'll go ahead and use the symmetry tool here. And it's pretty much just a bunch of rounded cubes. So I'll just go ahead and place those down, make sure we get the ones on the side and all that good stuff. Here I'm going to be doing the legs. You can see the symmetry that I was trying to create was kind of going in a different direction, so I'll just do two at a time. So I'll just go ahead and place this guy here, just needed to flip it over. And position 2 there. And we're ready to just go ahead and slide the other 2 down to the side. All right, cool. Next up is the supports underneath it. Again, same basic setup, just some cubes that are a little bit rounded, just kind of positioning them as they were in the reference, just like a very basic mid-century modern table. For the supports in the middle here, you're going to see me do a couple different methodologies of it. Basically, I started with one cube and I was like, rounded, all right, cool. Let me go ahead and, oh, wait a second. What if I mess with this thickness as a way of creating the support beams, and then as I scale it out, it might get a little bit fatter, and like that might be kind of a cool element. And then I did it, and I looked at it, and I was like, I don't like that at all. And again, when I was creating these, I knew that I can, the nice thing about the voxel-based modeling system is that if you go a little bit over in the width, you can always just trim that down. So as you can see, I went ahead and just went to a basic, as the same size of the beams going across there, because I just didn't really like the way that the other one looked. So there goes the table. Pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of getting the proportions right, understanding your reference image, and just kind of matching all of these rounded cube shapes and getting the symmetry working. From there, it's just a matter of exporting it out and doing the same thing we did with the surfboards, creating a new reference to this table and just swapping out in the scene with that, proxy object I had there, that little cube originally. All right, so next up, we're gonna be tackling doing the plates and cups on there. So again, something that is pretty super easy. Like I just kind of created a UFO shaped sphere, like a flattened sphere, and then just created one slightly smaller and scooped it out of the middle, and that's kind of the plate. From there, it's just a matter of kind of warping these edges a little bit. Like I wanted this to feel like, again, that handmade Japanese porcelain, so it's just a lot of imperfections in there, and that's pretty much it. From there, I'm gonna go ahead and make the cups. Again, a cylinder, rounded edges, nothing too crazy or specific. I know they're pretty small on screen, so I'm not gonna go too crazy with them. Again, same thing. Just make a cylinder, round it, taper it, give it a little base here. That's actually something I learned from a pottery class that I took. So that was kind of a nice little touch there. And then again, same thing, just going in and adding some imperfections. If there's like, these are kind of like super bubbly, so I just wanted to smooth them down a little bit more. And then it's just a matter of duplicating it for that second cup. And again, with all these being separate layers in the modeler file, it means that when you import them into Maya or any other 3D applications, they are separate pieces of geometry, so you can modify that and move them around independently. Yep. So go ahead and delete the proxies, go ahead and drop these on that tabletop, make sure their scale is about right. All right, from there, we're going to move on to modeling. Actually, probably my favorite thing I modeled for this, just because it was like the one thing that really worked out the very first time I did it, and that's the little book that's going to be on the table. So I just made a cube, then I used the split tool inside of Modeler that actually is like a cut, but it actually preserves both pieces of geo as separate layers. Scale down the inside a little bit to get it that like, interior book pages shape. And then it was just a matter of like carving out a couple cylinders out of each side of it to kind of be like that indentation along the spine, and then just finding the proper, smoothing strength so that it smooths it down and makes it a little bit more, I guess, worn or a little bit more natural, but without like completely obliterating that crease in there. So honestly, like that was it. That one took me, I didn't need to speed that one up that much. That one took me like a couple minutes to put together, which was really cool. So again, you know the drill by now. Take it in the scene, get completely lost to the UI. There we go. And then place the book down in position. I only did one book in the modeler file. So what I could do is I can just kind of scale that and make that a second book for the daughter. So I can have them both reading the same reference. So if I swapped one, I could do the other. So no biggie there. The next up is I wanted to tackle that picture frame on the wall. I was excited about doing this one because I like the idea of being able to do, like a wood frame where you've got the, like the rectangle, but then you're able to like carve out the little individual like grooves in it and get that little pattern going. So lay down a beveled cube out of the gate, and then I just create some random shapes and be like, okay, cool, that's great. Smooth that down a little bit. And then, so one thing to note about the smoothing in Modeler is that it is dependent on the size of the brush itself. So just something to be aware of. So it's not only like purely that intensity, but it's also the size of the brush too. And then from there, I'm just gonna, I clip those. I felt like it was in wood shop again, where I clipped down those edges at 45-degree angles. And here's where I run into problems. So I was like, I'll just duplicate the pieces and then scale them up. Well, the problem with Modeler is that there's only like a universal scale function inside of the tool once you duplicate something. So I couldn't actually stretch them out horizontally. So in my brain, I was like, no worries, I'll just make it like this, and then I'll put the canvas in there. And what I'll do is once I get it into Maya, then I'll be able to just grab the individual vertices and stretch down and make a nice rectangular picture frame that way. So brilliant in theory, but once I get it into Modeler, you can see that the geometry isn't quite lining up, and for some reason they were also linked together. Like if I tried to move one of their vertices, it moved all of them, which I'm still not quite sure why that's the case, but that's what we got going on right now. So instead, here's what my brilliant mind did. You know what? There's no reason why this has to be a rectangular picture frame for this one, it can totally just be square. So I think that this, again, like if this was a final thing, I would definitely dive into it and figure out a solution, or probably just like, model a different, like do separate length and width picture frame edges. But in this particular case, like if I'm totally fine just creating it as a square. And one of the things you just saw me do, I had to re-import this a couple times. And it's because that inside of Modeler is that you can get confused as to when you've actually created a piece of geometry. Like you've got that template object, and without hitting spacebar, you don't actually create it. So, okay. Well, next up, we've got that concrete wall. So again, the picture I took with my family, and this was I intentionally saved this till the end. This is the last thing I needed to model, and that was because it was the thing I knew how to do the least. So I knew that I wanted to basically build like a stamp, essentially, because we have the ability to create a piece of geometry inside of Modeler and then save that geometry as a stamp and essentially like punch out pieces of geo out of different portions. So at this point, I'm just using some cubes and you saw me use a hollowed out sphere, which is essentially a ring, to just start to like make some shapes that would be symmetric. Because one of the things I was noticing from the reference is that the blocks are essentially like 4 blocks that make one shape, and then that's kind of repeated throughout the entire design. So I knew if I could get like one of those looking good, and again, it doesn't need to be anything too specific. Like honestly, from walking around my neighborhood, there's a bunch of different ones of these. It was just about me playing around with the tools a little bit and getting a pattern that I liked. All right, so once I had that in place, and again, I knew it could be rough because this is concrete and it's not like perfect. I realized that I'd actually built the positive part of it and not the negative part of it. So I wanted to do a little Boolean action to just kind of get that stamp. So what I did was I just made a cube the same size as the original, played around with the Boolean option. It took me a little while to get the UI figured out because you have to like select one first, then the second one, and then do the Boolean. You can see me like fumbling with that here. But basically, yeah, so I got that figured out, and now I was able to create like a negative shape of that pattern, so that I knew that when I could create like one big cube and then use a bunch of these to like stamp out the shape. So again, it's almost like a negative space thing. All right, so here I am making the entirety of the wall. I was kind of looking back and forth to that Maya file to get a rough idea of the size of it, like the proportions of it. And then you could see like I saved out that wall, and then I went back into the stamp file, and what I did was I exported that as an FBX. Once that's exported as an FBX, what I can do is I can then take that and make that a stamp inside of Modeler, and now I just have that like I have any other shape. So again, I can just duplicate that and use the symmetry tool to create a bunch of those. Oh, and I noticed that I like, you can see the little X shape in the middle kind of hangs over the edge. So I just kind of go through and kind of clean it up and make that nice and symmetric. There we go. All right, cool. So I've got that. Awesome. Now I can duplicate it a bunch of times, and so I can just duplicate and duplicate and duplicate and make a full wall out of this thing. But again, this is all the negative space. So I'm going to build this first, and then what I'm going to do is then I'm going to put all these together, and you can merge them all into one layer, which is very helpful for the Boolean. So I've got all that. Now I can create a cube that's slightly smaller than my stamp. And then again, it's that selecting game of like, which one do I select first or second, and play with it from there. Select one, select the other, and then use the Boolean operation to punch it out. All right, and there we go. Now we've got our concrete wall. I can go and delete that stamp, and now I'm just left with the that kind of repeated pattern concrete wall there. So now that I got all the basic model pieces in there. I did want to give like, because I'm a lighter by training and that's like where my heart is always forever, I did want to do like a quick mock-up of the lighting. And one of the things that I was noticing was that the thickness of the wall made it really, really difficult to get the shape, like the rays of light firing through it the way that I was kind of hoping for. So what I did was I actually made the wall a little bit thinner, probably thinner than would be structurally sound, but I don't really care if this thing actually stands at this point. I just wanted to make something that looked cool. But that was like something I thought would be really valuable as I move forward with this type of project. Just knowing that those types of concrete walls really need to be nice and thin in order, because otherwise once they get too thick, the angle of the light, like you just don't see the shape that well. So now the next step, this is a crucial step before moving it into Substance Painter. So this is identifying your texture sets. And you can do this in any software. I just happen to be in Maya, so I'm doing it in Maya. And basically what I'm doing is I'm assigning different shaders to the different objects of the scene. Like everything that I want to be, like I said, a separate element. Oh, here we go. And I that's when I selected that very first thing that I modeled, the mom surfboard, and I realized, you know what, like this is way too dense of poly, so I'm gonna go ahead and reduce that back down a little bit. And then again, I can just swap it out in the reference editor and it just pops into place there. So, okay, cool. Yeah, so going back through and just assigning materials to everything with the idea, yeah, like once I get into Painter, everything that I have as a separate shader will be a separate object that I can apply materials to. So like, you know, the picture frame, I just made one, the table I made a separate element. And again, just to give it some, give us some control there. The books are a unit. And the question is often asked, like, well, what shader should you use in Maya to be read inside of Painter? And the honest answer is it doesn't matter. Like, I think I was just using the Lambert shaders here. And the colors that I'm putting on totally don't matter. It's just for my visualization to make sure that I got everything. And then the key is to name your shader what you want it to appear as inside of Painter. So like if you want, you know, you name your shader cups or floor or concrete wall or whatever. And then I just exported it as, you can export it as an FBX or OBJ. And then once you have that, then you're ready to roll. So I can go into Painter, I can go up to File, New, and I can navigate to that exported FBX file, just leave the default settings, open it up, and away we go. Oh, this is where I realized that I did not like the original UVs that were created in, that were exported out of Modeler. So I went ahead and used the Painter methodology of unwrapping UVs. From there, it was just a matter of, like, again, I always work, this is a drawing technique, but I kind of work the same way. I work very loose to very fine. So I just like block things out. So it's very easy to be like, okay, I know what I want the floor to look like, and really get into the floor and really design it and really like nitpick it. But that's just not the way that I work at all. Like the way that I work is that I will, again, just kind of like do even just like a single, color or just like a really basic material in order to get a rough idea. And again, like for these surfboards, I just want to kind of block this out. Again, nothing is permanent. You know, it's a lovely non-destructive workflow with the substance stuff. So at any point I can go back and kind of change that around. And you can see me doing it here. Like I'm like generally just kind of selecting colors on the fly and not being that particular about the way that I do things. Also, because I used an auto unwrapping functionality, you'll see me using the triplanar methodology a lot, because the UVs, the UV setup will create a lot of seams, and triplanar just totally ignores the UV seams, and I can just kind of put anything. Oh, here's me in the asset library. So I'm just kind of, checking out some different porcelains and ceramics. You'll see me kind of popping back and forth between the asset library and Painter at times. So again, just playing around with some different substances on the objects, and some different settings to see what I like, because I didn't really, in hindsight, I probably should have like fleshed that out a little bit more, but that's all right. Like my little sketches were just little black and white things on my iPad, so probably could have done a better job of that. Okay, so now you see me working on the books for the bindings and the exteriors. I just did like a rough leather, just put different colors on the different ones. And I just, again, like, you don't see much of the inside of the book, so I just kind of kept that as a white object on there as well. So this is just me seeing what I can get onto this wall. Again, the UV unwrapping wasn't great on it, and it was creating some issues. And again, if this was final, I would go back and unwrap those by hand. But I love proof of concepts, because I can just be like, you know what, it's fine. I thought initially that I wanted it to be like a really kind of a bright poppy color. And I do this all the time in designs, where I'm like, yes, I want to really create something colorful and fun. And you'll see me by the end of this project going back to like a more neutral color and adding pops of color in smaller areas. I tend to go like too heavy-handed with my pops of color at first, and I really need to kind of dial it back in. Again, you learn that about yourself as you're going forward, and then you just kind of figure it out from there. So for the wood frames, I had to put 2 different wood materials on the vertical and horizontal ones, just to get the grain to go the correct way. Again, that's sometimes you have to do that with the triplanar method. And this is me just kind of mocking up a painting. So I just grabbed a brush and just kind of made some basic color scheme that I thought I might like, and just kind of layered them together. At the time, again, I knew that this isn't going to be the final painting, but just wanted to slug something in there to see how it looked. For that back wall, I just wanted it to be like a little bit of texture to it, so I added like a concrete wall material for the height, and then just kind of kept it kind of a pure white. And then the ceiling just made it's a flat cube. Like that wasn't even done in modeler. That was just done in Lina, and I kept that up the whole time. So I just wanted to get a wood plank material on there to kind of give it a little more detail and life. Again, not a major focus point. I'm not even really sure if it's going to show up in the final composition, but it's good to have at least something on there so you can get some bounce color and things like that onto the surrounding objects. It's at this point that I realized that I forgot to do my texture texture map painting, so I just went ahead and knocked that out real quick. Again, you can see because of the issues with the UVs on the concrete wall, like the ambient occlusion and stuff doesn't really look that well. Again, if this was a final thing, I would go back and unwrap those UVs by hand, but it is not, so I'm not going to do that. So instead, I'm just going to delete that ambient occlusion texture set from that wall. Again, not the official way you're supposed to do it, but you know what? You're just trying to get to an idea with this and just kind of trying to visualize something. All right, so one thing about the floor, when I added that, it was just like a little bit too perfect. So what I wanted to do was throw in some dirt and some grime and just some believability into it. So I used a generator to get that, and just a little paintbrush to kind of pull that away. And as I did it, as I go forward in this, I realized that it was really more about getting more detail in the wood grain than it was about actually feeling like dirt. But yeah. And then for that back wall, I wanted to get some more texture in there. So my favorite little technique with this is to create a fill layer and then paint just some cracks or just some whatever, the actual surface, the actual paintbrush itself doesn't matter that much. But the key is I take that paint stroke and then I add a slope blur to it. And that really helps to create a concrete wall looking effect. And then if you don't want it to look super gnarly, you just kind of go in and blur it a couple pixels too. So this is me just kind of playing around with it. Again, you'll see this tendency that I have where I go way too heavy-handed with something out of the gate, and then I pull it back later. All right, so now I wanted to look into the details a little bit more in these books. So for those, I wanted to look at the paper on the side. Again, I know I didn't want to do anything that was too complex in there. So all I did was I just added a black color, applied that color to the books itself, and then used a noise pattern that was stretched in whatever the X or Y direction. I guess that would be the X direction. Just to kind of because again, from the side, you just want it to look like individual pages. So just dialing in that stretched noise pattern to get it to look right. And then also making sure that I took it off of pure black. Because anytime you're working with PBR, there's very, very few materials that exist in the world that are a pure black or a pure white. So I try to keep it in between in a little bit of a gray zone. Nothing's ever purely saturated. So I kind of tend to stay more towards the middle of the color wheel thing. And then for the cover of the books, I just wanted to identify a couple of basic colors, from the color palette. And then I wanted to get some, not logos, but like book cover design. So I just, I had this eye image from Adobe stock that I'd used in a previous project. So I just want to kind of pop that on there. I don't know, I just thought it was kind of cool as a book cover idea. Just to kind of keep it like, figured it might be like a murder mystery or some sort of like suspenseful thing. So I thought it was kind of cool. Just use that as a little bit of a gold piece, and then also using it to drive the height a little bit too. So there's an artifact down the sleeve of the book, and I actually kind of like that. I thought that was kind of cool, so I kept that. Like usually for 3D you don't like those kinds of things, but I would guess in the print media world that would be a pretty cool little feature. So now I'm just making the smaller the daughter's book a little bit more just unique in that, in the color. And then I thought about this one being more like a sketchbook than a novel, so I just wanted to add kind of a pattern on top of it. All right, cool. Enough for a quick rough out. So then moving out to the plates, just using some more porcelain filters and porcelain looking things. I've done some experimentation with porcelain in the past, and it was a matter of using some cracked paintbrushes to get some different size cracks in it, like large, medium, and small. And so I had saved that out previously as a smart material, as a porcelain starter. And so I just thought I'd throw that out there for now. For the cups, I wanted to distinguish those a little bit, so I used another porcelain smart material that I had. I have a couple different ones, actually. I'm just swapping them out. You can see this is a very not scientific approach of doing this. It's just a matter of trial and error and seeing what I like here. I also tried these Egyptian-looking, ancient hieroglyphic materials that are in the asset library. I thought those might be kind of cool. And again, I keep saying this, but with this stuff, you really want to lean into the fact of experimenting and just because it's so easy to throw something away that you don't like. Again, you see me messing around with the plate here. You don't feel like you have to just go down one path. And it's it's like the same way I was modeling something. If it's working, awesome. If not, feel free to dump it and start fresh again, because the knowledge that you have from that first iteration will definitely speed up your second pass, and ultimately you'll be at a better place overall. Added some darkness there to the more detailed blue wood. Kind of circled back here on these surfboards. I just want to create a little bit of a darker edge there, and then a little, I like the vertical lines down the middle of them. It's I wanted something to be kind of like a common element between the two of them, even though they are so different. It's the way that, a parent and a child will have the same nose or the same chin or the same way they laugh or something. I wanted to keep one element kind of the same to, again, even though these are very different and unique surfboards, they kind of have some design elements that make them similar to one another. So continuing forward, it's just a matter of adding more detail to the surfboards. Again, these are going to be kind of my main focal points of the shot, so I really kind of want to make those, really want to spend a little bit of time getting some believability and just some detail in there. Again, I didn't have a super sought after design idea, especially for the little one. You'll see me throughout this whole process kind of bounce back and forth on that one a little bit. So after I get them in a place, I know I'm not done with it. So what I do want to do is I have this methodology where I just kind of want to move things through the pipeline as fast as possible. So I just kind of want to see what the way that these materials were being lit. So I didn't want to just get married to something, and then by the time that I started lighting it, realize, this isn't working well. So I brought it into Stager. It's again a quick, single button send to Stager function from Painter. And then I wanted to do some more lighting practice with the actual materials that were in there. As you can see, I quickly realized that I didn't necessarily like the color of that concrete wall, so I switched that back to white. Same thing with the back wall. I just thought that it was the detail added in the concrete wall just kind of looked too much. It was just too gritty and too grungy. So what I did was I just used there's a paper material that's like wallpaper inside of Painter here. So I just wanted to slap that on there, just to get an idea of what a more traditional one is. I wasn't sure if I liked that. The other thing that I noticed too was that I didn't really have a baseboard between the wall and the ground. And like when you kind of put these different materials on there, you notice the difference. So yeah, so I knew I wanted to import that blue color. It was something that I thought might work well on the concrete wall. I'm realizing now that I like it better on the black wall or the back wall when that wall's a little bit flatter. So now that I have like a rough idea of what I think is and isn't working in the file, it's a matter of going back, now taking it back into the Painter file, being like, okay, super craggy back wall. I can really take down all that to like a tenth of the value that I had it at, and then add that color that I want. For the concrete wall, I'm actually not concerned about it at all in Painter, because I actually found a material that's just one of the default ones in Stager that I thought worked really well. And then it was just a matter of like simplifying some of these other patterns. Again, like cleaning up the cups. And for that painting on the wall, I didn't want to get held up too long painting that. So I thought maybe it would be a good idea to grab something from the asset library. So I tried that, and then I went to Adobe Stock and just found some paintings. Again, like it's more about like getting to a place where you can evaluate it for future. Again, like a quick sample. I keep saying that. So now I've got it back in the Stager with some of those updates. I went ahead and added just like cube down there as the floorboard. I knew that didn't need to be super detailed. And then I started realigning the lights again. So setting them up in a way, kind of like figuring out the camera placement, and then just getting, just dialing in that lighting look a little bit. So the lighting is a combination of spotlight shining through the concrete wall to get that shape on the wall, and then a couple of area lights surrounding the scene, really acting as bounce lights, right? Like, so on a bright sunny day, you're going to get a lot of color for full bounce and fill and all that good stuff. So I really wanted to try and simulate that with some area lights pumping in some, like warm light bouncing up from the ground, or just kind of like, filling in from some of the surrounding objects that aren't really there. All right, once I got the lighting in place, I went ahead and took another look at the camera that I had laid out. So then at this point, once I got that in place, it was all about rendering it out, just an image, again, like not a final, and then taking it into Photoshop to get a better look at it inside of Photoshop. Because I knew once I had it in there, then I could go back and be like, okay, I'm gonna play with the values, I'm gonna play with the colors, I'm gonna do, like I essentially do a mock paint over with this. And then what I can do is I can take that paint over back into, like, go back upstream, take it back into Painter, and then make those adjustments for reels on the material so they could, because what you want is you want to get the secondary effect side. All right, okay, so now I get into this surfboard again, the child surfboard. Again, I just wasn't thrilled with it, and so I really just wanted to dial in, and again, the table, I wanted to get that color right, and a few other things in there. Oh, I also wanted to break up that back wall. Really kind of get some variation on the paint, kind of create some drips. I tried a few different approaches to that. I just found that like a grunge map with a small bit of height, and just a color variation really helped add some believability on that back wall. For the surfboards, I really wanted to pump up because I wasn't feeling any reflectivity, and never like anything really in the coat. So I kind of wanted to also increase the reflectivity on there, and I did the best I could in the materials, but you'll see I kind of take another approach to that in the future too. So again, another round of, now that I've got these materials, like this pass of the materials done, I send it back over into Stager, and really what happens is when you send it over again, you get all the models, but you also get like new shaders. So instead of updating the geometry, I left the original geometry in there, and I just swapped out the new materials in its place. So, and again, that's just kind of how I work back and forth between Stager at this point, is just looking at it in Stager, there's something I want to adjust in Painter, going back into Painter, updating it, and then reapplying that new material. Because I know these are going to stay the same. I know everything's going to stay the same. I mentioned how I wanted more reflectivity on the surfboard. So I kind of felt like I pushed it as far as I could in the shader, and now I'm going to do a little trick, and that's basically do a second render pass of the surfboards as just like a piece of metal, like where they're made of metal, and I want them to reflect something in the space. So what I'm doing is I'm throwing some random objects like a plant and a glowing orb in there just to create a breakup of the reflections. And what I'm going to do is you'll see me in Photoshop, I'll then take that render and just apply that one to the surfboards themselves to get that extra, it's an actual reflection in the room, but just kind of like dialing it in by adding that to the composition. From there, it's a matter of like doing some Photoshop tricks of, adding some vignetting, going back and forth with some just different looks and that kind of thing. So then the other thing I wanted was to create a sense of like nostalgia. And for me, nostalgia is actual film photographs. And one of the things about real film photographs that are often duplicated in Instagram filters and such is having an actual like a Polaroid border or a medium format border or 35mm format of a border. And I was always sold on, I always really liked it. Like whenever I did photography, I come from a photography background. I always, it's like a source of pride for a photographer to print full frame. It means you don't have to crop anything with post. But when I started to add them myself, I just didn't like the look. And so what I always do is I always go back to like what am I actually trying to do? And what I'm actually trying to do is simulate Richard Avedon's In the American West look, which was like this large format style of border. And so I just looked it up online, got that reference, went to Adobe Stock and got a large film format back. Looking like there is basically what it is. There's two openings where you slide the film in, and then the black is where the border is. I don't know. It doesn't. I don't even know if it makes sense at a square image, like a medium format image with that. But like, hey, we're going with it. I liked it. So now it's a matter of getting a little bit of film grain in there, and again, just getting this idea of it being kind of filmy. So at this point, this might be the most important point in the process, which is like I'm looking at it, feeling like I'm feeling pretty good about it. But you know what? I just want to do a sanity check. And so I send it around to some of my artist friends and people I trust. And I got some feedback on it. And some of the feedback was they wanted to see even more reflection in the surfboards. They wanted to see more warmth in the light. So at this point, this is where I remind everybody to find people that they trust to give feedback on your work. So I actually added a duct tape material to the surfboards and got one more reflection pass because I wanted kind of like a Ripley not so perfect reflection in there. So I rendered those out, got that in there too. So it's a little bit of, like I said, a little duct tape in there. And then I ran another pass of adding some warmth to the light and getting that. Oh, and somebody else suggested adding some dust sparkles in there too. So a little warmth, little dust particulates in there. And at this point, you're just going to see me get real finicky with the color corrections and just that like post cleanup stuff. And from there, dial it in. And I am done. All right, so that was the workflow from start to finish. All 8 hours I spent working on this thing, condensed down to a much shorter version. But like I said, this is just the first kind of proof of concept of this. Am I 100% happy with the outcome? No, I like it, but like it feels good, but there's definitely things I learned that I want to really build from. So if you want to see this whole progress, if you want to see how this plays out, make sure you hit the subscribe button. This is a bit of a new format for me. If you like seeing tutorials in this way, make sure you let me know. If you hate it, also let me know in the comments down below. And I look forward to speaking to all of you soon and creating more images. So until then, I'll see you all soon.